Creation of the Universe, Part 3. As we have seen in Part 2, the unseen other dimensions could be the spiritual plane that most religions believe exist. And the Latter-day Prophet Joseph Smith said that there are these spiritual planes. And the key force that controls all these dimensions could be gravity, because gravity is the one force that allows for contraction or expansion of space-time, and it also has effects on the other dimensions. A little later we'll show you how other universes might be formed. Now, if our universe is a brane of some higher dimensional space, that would explain why the force of gravity is so incredibly weak compared to the other major forces, such as electromagnetism. This is a major problem to particle physicists. If gravity isn't confined to our dimensions, then much of its attractive power would leak into the bulk or group of branes. Some experiments are currently underway to test this possibility. So for a being that wanted to go on and form other brane universes, it would be necessary to know and be part of all the dimensions, so that he or she could manipulate whatever was necessary to make a new brane universe. A spiritual being who exists on some other dimension but not on all couldn't do it, so the physical is necessary. No one can tell if these theories about extra dimensions are real or just artifacts of mathematical models. But there is an indication that there is something out there that is undetectable except by gravitational effects, and that is dark matter. Astronomers have discovered that much of the universe's mass is invisible. In fact, it is estimated that this dark matter constitutes 83% of the matter in the universe and 23% of the mass energy. It seems to be concentrated around visible matter, such as galaxies. Galaxies act as if they have a spherically concentrated halo of dark matter all around them, with the visible matter concentrated in the galactic disk at the center. Perhaps this dark matter is where the spiritual creations reside. Joseph Smith says all physical creations were first formed in spiritual form. Is this dark matter? It could be. It is a rational explanation of both latter-day revelation and modern scientific discoveries. Now we come to the intelligences. Joseph Smith taught that spiritual bodies were formed by God out of intelligences. These intelligences are individual entities which existed prior to their spiritual birth. LDS Scripture says, "Intelligence, or the light of truth, was not created or made, and neither indeed can it be." Apparently, these are some sort of pre-spirit conscious self-existences, which could have included some individual identity and variety. The question of whether pre-spirit intelligence had individual identity and consciousness remains unanswered. The Church has no more revealed information on the subject. The author theorizes that these intelligences are possible existences, much the same as quantum particles have a vast number of possible locations that all exist at the same time until an observation is made to nail down their actual position. Then the particle collapses to one location. The possibilities become actual. It could be that when the universe was created or formed in the Big Bang, all possibilities of entities that could exist in that universe came into existence at the same time. not actual entities, but possible ones, perhaps as some form of data probability wave function, kind of like a DNA data set describing each possible organism. The information of DNA arrangements, not the actual physical DNA. There were possible people of all sorts, smart, strong, blue, purple, small, and green, as well as other creatures, giants, lizard men, unicorns, dragons, anything possible that could come out of the mix of matter and the laws of the universe. Zillions of possibilities, perhaps an infinite amount of potential people and things. Then as God chose each one to form into a spiritual form, that possibility collapsed into an actual form, the spiritual form. This probably came about by some sort of conscious focus, which we will discuss in just a few seconds. Later, these spirits were given physical bodies by being born on the earth. Now it is time to mention how modern consciousness theories apply. You see, for the universe to exist, someone has to consciously observe it. Modern quantum experiments have come up with puzzling results that seem to show that elementary particles can be in a wave form, energy in no specified and localized position, and also a solid particle, energy that's concentrated in one location at the same time. It is not really one or the other, but it is in some way an in-between state that can only be described as a possibility wave function. It could be here or there, and the wave function formula describes a possibility of it being here as opposed to there. The formula describes a sort of fuzzy cloud area of where the particle could be. It says, we don't know where it is, but it might be here in this general vicinity. Scientists have also discovered that it depends on how you measure that particle what results you get. In other words, the very act of measuring the particle makes it be here or there. It takes a conscious observation, the measurement, to make the particle really here as opposed to kind of all over the place. This is commonly known as consciousness causes collapse theory. According to this interpretation of quantum mechanics, an observation by a conscious observer is what makes a wave function collapse into one specific result. Exactly what defines an observer or an observation is not actually specified by the theory. But for our purposes, we can say any conscious mind paying attention to any physical action would count. So according to this viewpoint, the universe as a whole would remain a possibility wave and not be real until a conscious mind or minds paid attention to it or observed it. Nothing is real until someone makes it real, deliberately and by choice. Maybe that conscious mind doing the observing is God. Maybe it is us. Humankind, as we know, are conscious, without a doubt. Maybe it's both God and us together. After all, our conscious knowledge of the universe is not something that is separate from the universe. It is definitely a part of the universe. So you could say that for humans to know the universe is part of the way the universe knows itself. Then perhaps you could say that in a way we help create the universe, at least the part that we are in. Joseph Smith taught that Christ actually formed this earth with the assistance from other children of God. Maybe those others were us. Maybe this is how it came about. Somehow the creation comes through the conscious minds of humankind. Okay, maybe you don't like the idea that physical things aren't actual until someone observes them. You don't like the idea of an observer-caused universe. Well, there is another way to view the quantum wave function problem, and that is the many worlds interpretation. It is an entirely mechanistic interpretation of quantum mechanics. In this explanation, the whole universe is one big wave function, the universal wave function. And at each point where a conscious decision is made between two choices, a new universe splits off, so there are now two universes, one describing what happens for choice 1, and the other universe for choice 2. So if I decide to turn left instead of right at some point, there would then be a universe where I turn left, as well as one where I turn right. Each choice I make results in more universes splitting off. Same goes for you and everybody. There are a dizzying multiplying of many possible worlds. In one, you go to college and you get a certain job. In another, you don't finish school and get an entirely different job. You meet a different mate. You raise a different family. In one, you die young. In another, you die much later. In another, you never even existed. Those are your two choices. The consciousness causes collapse interpretation or the many worlds interpretation. I go for the consciousness causes collapse interpretation because it fits best with revealed truths. Of the two choices, it is the more rational. You see now how you can use modern revelation and modern science to come to conclusions that you wouldn't have a clue about without the two together? It is a form of rational Mormonism as described more fully in the book disclosed at the end of this video. Let's look next at time and where it all began. Time is an interesting problem. Did time begin at the creation of the universe? If the universe began as the Big Bang, did time come into existence with space as a form of space-time? Does God exist outside of time? If the universe started at the Big Bang, where was God before then? We'll discuss where was God in just a minute. We also have questions. Can we go beyond time? Is the arrow of time always in one direction in the macro world? The one-way arrow of time moving always into the future is a very big problem in physics, since the equations that govern individual particles work equally well in both directions. Usually scientists say entropy gives time its arrow of direction. So the path from high order, which is low entropy, to maximum disorder, which is high entropy, or complete bland equilibrium, defines the arrow of time. The flow to equilibrium separates before events from the final event. Once you reach an equilibrium, then the arrow of time no longer matters. At that point, no change is possible. To have time, you must have something different. Everything can't be the same. You need difference. So there is room for change. The God that creates nothing rules the kingdom of no time. Time doesn't exist. God has to make or create something different to be God. We are a necessary part of God's existence. Before we consider other universes, we need to define what the universe means. How can there be other universes if the definition of universe is the totality of everything that exists, or has existed, or will exist, including all matter and energy and space-time and antimatter and negative space and negative energy and virtual as well as real particles and the planets and the stars and the galaxies and the contents of intergalactic space, everything, seen and unseen. If it is everything, how can there be something else? Well, it's hard to comprehend with our finite and limited minds. But science, and particularly mathematics, has defined constructs that include different universes, each one a totality on its own. But basically it comes down to the possibility that there are other existences that are not part of ours. That if we search out everything in our universe, we will not discover them, for they are not part of our existence. These universes are not connected to ours. They are not places that we can see, or that we can go to, or that we can influence, or even be influenced by. They are separate existences that we cannot visit in any form, except by conjecture, mental construction. We'll get into more on that scientific principle of multi-universes in just a bit, and the developing scientific theories of multiple universes later. It's very interesting, and this day and age is a very exciting time to be alive as science probes the very foundations of the creation of the universe. Go, Large Hadron Collider, go, find that so-called God particle, the Higgs boson. How about the other time, which is beyond our time? As I mentioned earlier, there's a possibility of a time before time began. What? How can there be a time before time began? Well, once again, our finite, limited minds boggle. But suffice it to say that if there can be another universe, other than our own, it would have another time, a time outside our time. Our universe contains all time possible, an infinite amount of time. By definition, the universe has everything, including all time. But if there was another universe, it would also contain its own time, an infinite amount of time. But not any of our time. It would be outside of our time. Before and after all become meaningless, beyond time. Many scientists argue that the universe, at least the one that we know, must have had some sort of beginning. They say that if the universe is eternal, and if it had no beginning, then it should have reached a state of complete disorder already, as it had an infinite amount of time to slowly unwind. Well, you can see this is not the case. There is still much order in the universe, so it must have had a start, and many point to the Big Bang as the beginning of it all. Thus, that would tend to prove that the universe had a beginning. But we have learned through modern revelation that our universe may have had a beginning, but God had no beginning. There are a number of rational ways to deal with the apparent discrepancy. One way to explain things could be the brain theories mentioned in the spirit-body section earlier. As various brains sort of floating about in the bulk, a bunch of all possible brains, tend to bump into one another, which would cause a big bang at the juncture. So our Big Bang could have been one of many Big Bangs being produced in infinity. So our time could have begun at our Big Bang, but there would be a more universal time in the bulk of brains, which is all the possible existence, which includes all time possible. In the case of the bulk, there never would have been no time. The possibilities for all time and all brains have always existed. Another of these new ways to explain the beginning of time is called the multi-universe theory. Because quantum physics allow energy fields to yield random fluctuations, some fluctuations in the dark energy background could act as seeds that trigger new rounds of space-time inflation, which would then be viewed as Big Bangs. These would create a random new crop of universes budding from empty space. Some of these budding universes will collapse back into black holes if they don't expand fast enough. and they will evaporate. But some others will expand forever. Those that expand will eventually thin out, leaving new empty space from which more budding based on the dark energy fluctuation and inflation can start.